Ocean View Bluff was the kind of place people dreamed of calling home, a coastal town where waves kissed golden shores and sunlight danced across the rugged cliffs. The quaint streets were lined with charming shops, and a lighthouse stood tall, guarding the serenity of the ocean. To the outside world, it was paradise. But beneath the surface of this idyllic setting, a storm was brewing, one that would leave devastation in its wake. At the heart of this seemingly tranquil town lived the Collins family. Ethan Collins was a charismatic real estate agent with a talent for selling dreams, though his own had started to feel hollow. His chiseled good looks and magnetic personality made him a favorite among clients and neighbors alike. Beside him was Sophia Collins, a dedicated elementary school teacher known for her grace and kindness. She embodied everything a loving wife and mother should be, managing to juggle her career while raising their 3 children, Liam, the thoughtful eldest at 12, precocious Nora, 7, and their youngest, Lucy, a wide-eyed 3-year-old who adored her parents. To the residents of Ocean View Bluff, the Collinses were the epitome of a perfect family. They lived in a stunning home perched atop the cliffs, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed breathtaking views of the ocean. From the outside, their life seemed like a dream, a picturesque marriage, well-behaved children, and a thriving career. Yet, the reality behind their closed doors was far more complicated. Ethan's days were consumed by his career, his evenings spent either glued to his phone or attending networking events that blurred into the early hours of the morning. Sophia, while patient and understanding, often felt the growing chasm between them. She masked her loneliness by throwing herself into her teaching and caring for the children, hoping Ethan would one day rediscover the spark they once shared. But the strain was taking its toll. Liam, observant and sensitive, picked up on the tension. He noticed how his mother lingered longer at the kitchen sink, staring at the ocean as if searching for answers. He saw how his father's smiles didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. Nora and Lucy were too young to sense the undercurrents, but the house was steeped in an uneasy silence that even they could not ignore. Ocean View Bluff was a town of whispers, where even the smallest ripples of drama traveled faster than the tide. The Collinses' picture-perfect life kept the whispers at bay, but that perfection was a fragile facade. A single crack, and the illusion would shatter, exposing the vulnerability in secrets within. As the Collins family continued their delicate dance of maintaining appearances, fate was preparing to knock on their door in the form of Isla Harper. The arrival of this seemingly innocent young woman would be the match that lit the fire, unraveling the carefully woven tapestry of their lives. For now, the Collinses clung to their illusion, unaware of the darkness creeping into Ocean View Bluff, a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. The day Isla Harper arrived in Ocean View Bluff, the town basked in the glow of a late summer sun. The scent of salt and blooming wildflowers hung in the air as Isla stepped off the old bus that had carried her away from the chaos of city life. With a suitcase in hand and ambition burning in her chest, she took a deep breath, letting the tranquility of the town seep into her. It felt like a new beginning, a blank canvas on which she could paint a better future. Ocean View Bluff was a far cry from the crowded streets Isla had left behind. Its narrow cobblestone roads curved along the cliffs, offering sweeping views of the ocean. Locals went about their business with an easy pace, greeting each other with familiarity that Isla both envied and found foreign. For the first time in a long while, she felt small, like a stranger in a world she didn't yet belong to. But Isla was no stranger to challenges. At 23, she carried the weight of dreams she couldn't yet afford, dreams of independence, stability, and a life far removed from the struggles that had defined her youth. She had taken the leap, enrolling in a small college nearby and hoping to support herself through part-time work while she studied. The thought of what lay ahead thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. Her first encounter with Ethan Collins was nothing short of serendipitous. Isla had been wandering the streets, familiarizing herself with the town, when her eyes landed on a striking oceanfront property. A "for sale" sign swung gently in the breeze, and curiosity drew her closer. The house was magnificent, its clean lines and large glass windows reflecting the endless blue of the ocean. Isla's daydreams briefly took flight, What would it be like to live in such a place? Ethan, who had been showing the property to a client, noticed Isla standing by the gate. With his signature charm, he approached her, a professional yet easy smile on his face. Admiring the view? He asked, breaking the silence. Startled but quick to recover, Isla nodded. It's beautiful. Probably way out of my league, but still, breathtaking. Ethan chuckled. I'm Ethan Collins, the real estate agent handling this property. If you ever want to know more about the homes in this area, let me know. There was a confidence in his tone that caught Isla's attention, but what truly struck her was the warmth in his demeanor. For a moment, she let herself relax. The conversation flowed naturally. Isla shared that she had recently moved to town and was searching for part-time work to help cover her college expenses. I've been looking everywhere, but no one seems to trust a newcomer, she admitted with a nervous laugh. It's been harder than I thought. Ethan's expression shifted slightly, as if a thought had struck him. My wife, Sophia, might be able to help, he said after a pause. She's a teacher, and with 3 kids, things can get a little chaotic at home. She's mentioned needing some help around the house. Isla's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and relief. Really? That would be incredible. Thank you. Ethan took her contact information, promising to speak with Sophia and get back to her. Later that evening, over dinner, he brought up Isla's situation. She seems like a nice girl, hardworking and eager to prove herself, he said, casually mentioning their encounter. Sophia, always compassionate, agreed to meet her. When Isla was invited to their home later that weekend, she made an immediate impression. Her wide smile, polite demeanor, and genuine interest in the Collins children charmed Sophia. Liam, though shy, warmed up to her after a while, and little Lucy clung to her hand as if they'd been friends for years. By the end of the evening, Sophia made her decision. Isla would be hired to help with the children and assist around the house. For Isla, it felt like a lifeline. For the Collinses, it seemed like the perfect solution to their hectic lives. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect arrangement, an invisible thread of tension began to weave itself into the fabric of their lives. Isla's presence, though innocent at first, would soon shift the balance in ways none of them could foresee. And so, the stage was set. Ocean View Bluff welcomed its newest resident, but with her arrival came an unspoken promise of change, an unsettling ripple in the calm waters of the Collins family's carefully crafted world. Ethan Collins prided himself on his ability to control any situation. As a real estate agent, he had mastered the art of reading people, of knowing when to press forward and when to pull back. Yet, when it came to Isla Harper, he found himself uncharacteristically off balance. Her presence in his home was like a quiet storm, disruptive, alluring, and impossible to ignore. At first, it was nothing more than casual exchanges. Isla would arrive each morning with her bright smile, ready to dive into her tasks with the energy of someone eager to prove herself. She handled the children with patience and care, quickly winning over even the often reserved Liam. Sophia, grateful for the help, grew to trust Isla completely, even inviting her to share meals with the family on occasion. But for Ethan, Isla's presence was a slow-burning distraction. It began innocently enough. Ethan found himself noticing Isla's laugh, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of her ambitions or joked with the children. She had a youthful vitality, an energy that seemed to contrast starkly with the routine monotony of his own life. At first, he dismissed these thoughts as fleeting, harmless observations. But as weeks turned into months, those moments began to linger in his mind long after Isla had left for the day. Isla, for her part, wasn't oblivious. She could sense Ethan's subtle glances, the way his conversations with her grew increasingly personal. She wasn't actively seeking his attention, at least, that's what she told herself, but she couldn't deny the thrill of his charm, his magnetic presence. He wasn't like the boys her age, immature and self-absorbed. Ethan was confident, successful, and undeniably attractive. The tipping point came one evening when Sophia was out of town attending a teaching conference. Isla had stayed late to help with the children, who were unusually restless that night. After finally getting Lucy to sleep, she came downstairs to find Ethan in the living room, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses on the coffee table. "Long day?" he asked, his voice warm but tinged with something Isla couldn't quite place. She hesitated briefly before sitting across from him. "You could say that. Lucy has more energy than I've seen in a 3-year-old. Ethan laughed softly and poured her a glass. "You've earned this." The wine loosened their tongues, and the conversation quickly shifted from light-hearted anecdotes to deeper, more personal topics. Isla spoke of her struggles balancing college and work, of her dreams for a future that felt just out of reach. Ethan listened intently, sharing his own frustrations about the pressures of maintaining a perfect life that often felt anything but. "I don't know," Ethan said, his voice dropping. "Sometimes it feels like everything I've worked for is slipping through my fingers." Isla met his gaze, her blue eyes steady. "You're too hard on yourself, Ethan. From where I'm standing, it seems like you have it all." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe. But having it all doesn't mean much when it feels empty." There was a charged silence, the kind that begs to be broken. Isla shifted slightly, her knee brushing against his. The contact was electric, a spark that neither could deny. Ethan leaned forward, his heart pounding, and for a moment, the world around them ceased to exist. When their lips met, it was hesitant, a line crossed with both trepidation and exhilaration. What began as a single, stolen kiss quickly escalated. Their initial guilt was drowned out by the intensity of their connection, a magnetic pull that neither could resist. Isla represented everything Ethan felt he had lost: youth, spontaneity, and passion. For Isla, Ethan was a taste of the stability and admiration she had always craved. Their affair became a dangerous game. They met in secret, stealing moments when Sophia was away or when the children were asleep. Each encounter fed the fire, pulling them deeper into a web of deception. They convinced themselves it was manageable, that no one would ever find out. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, and the cracks in the Collins family's seemingly perfect life were beginning to show. Each clandestine meeting, each shared glance, was another step toward the inevitable reckoning, a moment neither Ethan nor Isla could escape. For now, they were intoxicated by the thrill of the forbidden, blind to the consequences lurking just beyond the horizon. Liam Collins was the kind of child who noticed things. At 12 years old, he had a quiet, observant nature that often left adults underestimating just how much he understood. He could see the unspoken tension between his parents, the way his mother's smile seemed strained and his father's eyes wandered when he thought no one was looking. Liam had learned to live in the background, blending into the corners of his family's busy life, but that didn't mean he was blind. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the pieces began to fall into place. Liam had come home early from school, feeling unwell after lunch. The house was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that made the creaking of floorboards sound like thunder. He dropped his backpack in the hallway and paused, noticing faint voices coming from the living room. Curious, he stepped closer, moving silently like a shadow. The voices grew clearer, his father's familiar low timbre and a softer, more melodic tone that could only belong to Isla Harper. That alone wasn't unusual. Isla was a regular presence in their home. But there was something different about the way they spoke, a warmth and intimacy that made the hairs on the back of Liam's neck stand on end. Peeking around the corner, Liam froze. His father and Isla were sitting close together on the couch, their bodies turned toward each other in a way that felt too familiar. Isla laughed at something Ethan had said, her hand lightly brushing his arm. It wasn't the touch of a nanny casually interacting with her employer, it was something more. Liam didn't fully understand what he was seeing, but he knew enough to feel the sharp sting of betrayal. As he watched, the scene unfolded like a nightmare. Isla leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile Liam hadn't seen directed at his mother in years. Then, to Liam's horror, his father reached out and tucked a strand of Isla's hair behind her ear, a tender, almost possessive gesture that made his stomach churn. Liam wanted to run, to disappear before they noticed him, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. It wasn't until Isla's gaze shifted and landed on him that he snapped out of his paralysis. Her blue eyes widened in surprise before narrowing slightly, a flicker of something dangerous flashing across her face. "Liam," she called sweetly, her voice masking the tension that now hung in the air. "I didn't see you there." Ethan's head jerked up, his expression a mixture of shock and guilt. "Hey, buddy," he said quickly, his tone forced. "What are you doing home so early?" "I wasn't feeling well," Liam mumbled, his voice barely audible. He tried to look anywhere but at them, the weight of their stares pressing down on him. "Come here for a second," Isla said, her tone still sugary but with an edge that made Liam's heart race. He hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to run. But before he could decide, Isla stood and crossed the room, placing herself between him and the doorway. Her smile was soft, almost kind, but her eyes held a coldness that made Liam shiver. "Liam," she said quietly, crouching to his level. "What you saw, that was just a grown-up conversation. Nothing for you to worry about." He nodded quickly, desperate to escape, but Isla's hand shot out, gripping his arm firmly. Her nails dug into his skin, and her voice dropped to a whisper that only he could hear. "Listen to me, Liam," she hissed, her expression shifting to something dark and predatory. "You don't tell anyone about this. Not your mom, not anyone. Do you understand?" Liam's eyes widened in fear as he nodded again, his throat too tight to speak. Isla's grip tightened for a moment before she released him, her smile returning like a mask. "Good boy," she said, standing and smoothing her skirt as if nothing had happened. Ethan watched the exchange, his face pale, but he said nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Liam fled to his room, his heart pounding in his chest. He slammed the door and leaned against it, his mind racing. He wanted to tell his mother, to scream the truth, but Isla's icy threat echoed in his ears. He was just a child, caught in a world of secrets and lies he didn't ask to be part of. For the first time in his life, Liam felt truly alone. As the days passed, Liam withdrew from everyone. He avoided Isla, flinched at his father's attempts to engage with him, and evaded his mother's concerned questions. The weight of what he had seen and the fear of what might happen if he spoke up pressed down on him, suffocating and unrelenting. In the quiet corners of the Collins household, the cracks widened. And though Liam didn't know it yet, his silence would come at a cost far greater than he could imagine. The night Ethan Collins died was eerily calm. The waves outside crashed rhythmically against the cliffs of Ocean View Bluff, their endless cadence masking the storm brewing within the Collins household. Sophia was away with the children, visiting her mother for the weekend. Ethan had stayed behind, claiming work obligations, though his true intentions lay in his plan to confront Isla Harper. Over the past few weeks, guilt had consumed him. He could no longer ignore the damage his actions were causing. His relationship with Sophia, already strained, had grown colder. Liam avoided him at every turn, his once affectionate son now a shadow of himself. Ethan knew the affair with Isla had to end, for the sake of his family, for the sake of his own conscience. He just hadn't realized how dangerous Isla could be. That evening, Isla arrived unannounced. She wore a light summer dress that swayed with the breeze, but her eyes carried a storm. Ethan was caught off guard as he opened the door to find her standing there, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Ethan sighed, closing the door behind her. "Isla, this isn't a good time." "When is it ever a good time with you?" she shot back, her voice sharp. "You've been avoiding me, Ethan. Acting like I don't exist. What's going on?" He gestured toward the living room, motioning for her to sit. Instead, she remained standing, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I've been meaning to talk to you," Ethan began, keeping his tone measured. This thing between us, it has to stop." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, Isla simply stared at him. Then she laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Stop. You think you can just end this like it's nothing?" "It was a mistake," Ethan said, his voice firm but regretful. "I shouldn't have let it go this far. I care about my family, Isla. I need to fix things with Sophia. I need to fix things with my son." Isla's face darkened, her composure cracking. "Your family?" she spat. "What about me, Ethan? What am I supposed to do? Just disappear?" "You promised." "I didn't promise anything." Ethan snapped, his patience wearing thin. "This was never meant to be permanent, Isla. You knew that." The words cut deep, and Isla's hands clenched into fists. Her breath quickened, and for a brief moment, Ethan saw something in her eyes that made his stomach twist, pure, unfiltered rage. "You don't get to do this to me," she hissed. "You don't get to use me and throw me away like garbage." "Isla, calm down," Ethan said, taking a step back as she advanced toward him. "You're overreacting. Let's talk about this rationally." But Isla wasn't listening. Her voice rose, sharp and accusing. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? The perfect husband, the perfect father. But you're a liar, Ethan. A coward." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his frustration mounting. "This conversation is over," he said firmly. "You need to leave." He turned his back to her, walking toward the door. That was when it happened. In a blur of movement, Isla grabbed a decorative knife from the mantelpiece, a gift from Sophia, its blade meant for display, not violence. But in Isla's hands, it became a weapon. "Don't you walk away from me," she screamed, her voice filled with fury and desperation. Before Ethan could react, she lunged, the blade plunging into his back with a sickening sound. He stumbled forward, gasping as pain radiated through his body. Ethan collapsed to the floor, his vision blurring as blood pooled around him. Isla stood frozen, the knife still in her hand, her chest heaving as reality crashed down upon her. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind that comes before the storm breaks. Panic set in as Isla dropped the knife with a clatter and backed away, her mind racing. She couldn't be caught. She couldn't let this ruin her life. Grabbing her purse, she fled into the night, leaving Ethan's lifeless body sprawled on the living room floor. Hours later, Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor, noticed something amiss. The lights in the Collins house were still on, but the home was unusually quiet. Concerned, she approached the door and knocked. When no one answered, she peered through the window and screamed, her voice piercing the stillness. Ethan's body lay motionless, his eyes open but unseeing. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows against the walls of the Collins home. Detectives began their grim work, marking the bloodstains and collecting evidence. They called Sophia, informing her of Ethan's death but withholding details. The only words they offered were enough to send her into a spiral of panic. "You need to come home. Something's happened to your husband." Sophia's drive back was a blur of tears and fear, her children asleep in the back seat, unaware of the tragedy awaiting them. As the storm of grief gathered around the Collins family, Isla Harper disappeared into the darkness, setting the stage for the reckoning yet to come. The Collins household was shrouded in grief following Ethan's tragic death. Sophia had returned home to a nightmare, her husband gone, her once beautiful home now a crime scene. The children, confused and heartbroken, struggled to make sense of the loss. Liam, however, carried a heavier burden, one he couldn't share with anyone. He knew the truth, or at least part of it. And he knew Isla Harper was at the center of it all. In the days following Ethan's death, the police began their investigation. The initial findings were grim. Ethan had been stabbed, likely during an altercation. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting the killer had been someone he knew. Forensics scoured the house, collecting evidence, but the lack of clear leads frustrated the detectives. The Collins family and their closest acquaintances became the focus of questioning. Isla played her part well. When called in for questioning, she appeared distraught but cooperative, offering an alibi that seemed airtight. "I was at the college that evening," she said through tears. "I had a late exam. I didn't even know anything had happened until Sophia called me the next day." Her performance was convincing, and when the college confirmed she had attended an exam that night, suspicion shifted away from her. But Liam wasn't fooled. He had seen Isla's true nature, and her presence in the house after Ethan's death felt like a cold shadow looming over him. The weight of the secret crushed Liam. Isla's threat still echoed in his mind, her venomous promise that if he spoke up, she would silence him forever. He avoided her at all costs, his fear bubbling into quiet rage. Each time he saw her pretending to comfort his mother or playing innocently with his sisters, the fury grew. Isla had stolen his father and now infiltrated what little was left of his family. One evening, while Sophia was out meeting with investigators, Liam found Isla alone in the kitchen. His heart pounded as he approached her, the years of innocence in his eyes replaced by steely determination. He couldn't stay silent anymore. "Why did you do it?" he demanded, his voice low but trembling with anger. "Why did you kill my dad?" Isla froze, her hands tightening around the dish she was washing. Slowly, she turned to face him, her expression shifting from surprise to something far more chilling. "You don't know what you're talking about, Liam," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Yes, I do," Liam shouted, his voice cracking. "I know you were with him. I know you fought with him. You can't lie to me, Isla." For a moment, Isla's mask slipped, revealing the cold, calculating person Liam had seen only once before. "You think anyone will believe you?" she sneered, stepping closer. "You're just a kid. A scared little boy who knows nothing." But Liam wasn't backing down. "I'll tell my mom," he said, his fists clenched. "I'll tell the police. I'll tell everyone." Isla's eyes darkened, and in an instant, she lunged at him. Liam barely had time to react as Isla grabbed a knife from the counter. He stumbled backward, his fear erupting into a scream as she slashed toward him. The blade caught his shoulder, a sharp pain radiating through him as he fell to the floor. Blood seeped through Liam's shirt as he crawled away, but Isla, realizing what she had done, froze. Panic overtook her, and she dropped the knife with a clatter. Without a word, she bolted from the house, disappearing into the dark streets of Ocean View Bluff. Liam, clutching his bleeding shoulder, dragged himself to the phone and called his mother. "Mom," he gasped, his voice weak. "It's Isla. She did it." Sophia returned home to find her son in a pool of blood, his tear-streaked face filled with pain but also relief. The police arrived moments later, their flashing lights illuminating the night as paramedics rushed Liam to the hospital. Sophia was frantic, torn between staying by her son's side and helping the police track down Isla. It didn't take long to find her. Isla, drenched in sweat and panic, had hidden in a dark alley behind a row of shops. The officers cornered her, their commands sharp as she tried to explain, to bargain, to escape. But the facade of innocence was gone. Isla Harper was caught. Under intense interrogation, the truth spilled out. Isla confessed to killing Ethan in a fit of rage after he ended their affair and threatened to expose her. She described how she had waited until the house was empty, confronting him in what she thought would be her moment of power. But when he turned away, dismissing her like a passing mistake, something in her snapped. The knife was within reach, and she had acted without thought, plunging it into his back before fleeing into the night. The confession left Sophia shattered. The betrayal of Ethan's affair was dwarfed by the weight of his loss. Isla's words painted a picture of a man torn between two worlds, desperate to make things right but caught in a web of deceit and manipulation. The truth had finally come to light, but at a cost no one could have imagined. Liam, recovering from his injuries, found solace in the knowledge that he had done the right thing. His courage had unmasked Isla and brought justice for his father. But the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain, a painful reminder of the darkness that had invaded their once perfect world. The courtroom was silent except for the scribbling of pens and the occasional murmurs among reporters. Isla Harper sat at the defendant's table, her once charming demeanor replaced by a cold, detached expression. The trial had gripped Ocean View Bluff, transforming the sleepy coastal town into the center of media attention. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse as locals whispered about the tragic fall of the Collins family. Liam sat beside Sophia, his arm in a sling, still recovering from the attack that had nearly cost him his life. His testimony had been a pivotal moment in the trial. Standing before the jury, he recounted the months of tension, the affair he had discovered, and the horrifying night Isla had tried to silence him. His voice trembled, but his resolve never wavered. With each word, he exposed Isla for what she truly was, a manipulative and dangerous predator. Isla's defense attempted to paint her as a victim of circumstance, a young woman seduced and discarded by a man who should have known better. But her confession, combined with the damning testimony from Liam and the forensic evidence, left little room for doubt. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. When the judge announced Isla's sentence, life in prison without parole, a collective sigh of relief rippled through the courtroom. Justice had been served, but for the Collins family, the scars of Isla's betrayal and Ethan's infidelity ran deep. The victory felt hollow, the weight of loss still pressing heavily on their shoulders. Back at the Collins home, the once lively atmosphere was gone, replaced by an oppressive quiet. The house itself felt like a monument to the tragedy, every corner haunted by memories of what had been and what could never be again. Sophia couldn't bear to stay. Packing up their belongings, she made the difficult decision to sell the house, leaving behind the view of the ocean that had once brought her so much comfort. The family relocated to a small town inland, far from the whispers and prying eyes of Ocean View Bluff. The transition wasn't easy. Liam struggled with nightmares, waking in cold sweats as images of Isla's attack and his father's death played over and over in his mind. Nora and Lucy, too young to fully understand the gravity of what had happened, often asked questions that Sophia couldn't answer without tears welling up in her eyes. Sophia herself wrestled with a whirlwind of emotions, grief for her husband, anger at his betrayal, and guilt for not seeing the signs sooner. But as time passed, she found strength in her children. They were her anchor, her reason to keep moving forward. Determined to give them a semblance of normalcy, she threw herself into her new teaching job and created a routine that brought stability to their fractured lives. Liam, inspired by his mother's resilience, began to find his own footing. He joined a support group for children who had experienced trauma, where he discovered he wasn't alone in his pain. Slowly, the nightmares began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination to honor his father's memory by protecting the family Ethan had left behind. Meanwhile, Ocean View Bluff struggled to reclaim its peaceful reputation. The story of Isla Harper and the Collins family lingered in the air like an unwelcome ghost. Tourists still came to admire the picturesque cliffs and gentle waves, but the town's name was now synonymous with betrayal and tragedy. Locals avoided the subject, but the whispers never fully faded. Months turned into a year, and while the wounds remained, the Collins family began to heal. Sophia found solace in the little things, a laugh from Lucy, a kind gesture from Nora, or a rare moment of peace when Liam seemed like his old self again. Together, they created new memories, ones not tainted by the shadows of the past. One evening, as the family sat on the porch of their new home, Liam turned to his mother and said, "Do you think Dad would have been proud of us?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice steady but soft. "I know he would be," she said. And I know he'd want us to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it feels. For the first time in what felt like forever, Liam smiled. It wasn't the carefree grin of a child untouched by the world's cruelty, but a small, hopeful smile that hinted at the strength he was beginning to find within himself. The Collins family would never be the same, but they were learning to rebuild, piece by piece, day by day. Their story was no longer just one of tragedy but also one of resilience and hope. While the shadows of the past still lingered, they refused to let them define their future. And in that determination, they found a way to carry on, stronger than they had ever been before.